Last time we were together, I was bringing you a look at how data was being input into the singular model that the White House continues to trot out to us as the end-all be-all for coronavirus predictions, also known as the IMHE model. In a super plot twist straight out of an M. Night Shyamalan film, though, the Never-Trumpers at the Bulwark have now taken up the cause of the Trump administration. You see, apparently when those who are actually in love with status power see status power being put to work, they must take up the cause. But not more than 24 hours after our last time together, in what I'm sure is just a strangely timed coincidence, the Bulwark executive editor Jonathan V. Last, or JVL as he likes to be known, got busy telling us that anybody who dared to question the efficacy of the models was stupid and dangerous. JVL's biggest point? Those who attempted to look at reality versus the models were just know-nothing conservatives who should not be listened to. He opened up his daily diatribe against the questioners like this, quote, "Models are not facts. They are snapshots in time which attempt to predict with varying degrees of confidence what the future might look like, dependent upon a number of variables, which may or may not remain constant." So let's just stop right there for a second. Yes, Mr. Last, models are indeed predictive in nature. But what is the point of making a prediction if you aren't also going to look back at it and say, were we even close to the truth? Should a person who continues to get their weekly NFL picks incorrect be somebody that you take your house and bet on that entire week's games? Or should maybe you take that person's advice with a grain of salt? In other words, when the predictive models that are ruining lives and livelihoods is off by factors of 4, 5, and even 10x at times, perhaps we should start questioning why the experts are even taking the models seriously. Even if the model provides a range downwards and upwards from the median, the reality of coronavirus hospitalization numbers, which is what the IMHE model is most predictive of, tells us that even if you took the low-end numbers of the modeling, they still were not within a country mile of close to correct. To put it another way, we aren't gambling with fake money on a TV show. We're gambling with very serious real-life issues, and so pardon us if we take the modeling seriously. Just like the government powers that be are, otherwise why are we in lockdown? Now, I also want to make one thing abundantly clear here. I'm unaware of anybody that's looking into the data that expects 100% accuracy in modeling. It's insulting to suggest that, which is exactly what JVL did in his daily email blast, as he says, quote, "One of the hallmarks of know-nothing conservatism is that people will take a model, strip out all of the context and caveats, pretend that the model definitively predicted something it did not, and then try to dunk on it if the exact outcome does not materialize precisely on schedule." Now, you can go back and look for yourself here on the channel from a few days ago, and you can let me know if that rings true to what I said at all. Did I hide context or caveats, or did I present them to you in an upfront manner? Again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, literally no one expects an exact replication of the numbers of those that are hospitalized or in the ICU or dead. If anybody does, you should not be listening to them. But for the Tucker Carlsons, Steve Deaces, and Andrew Coppins of the world, myself, we do expect the models that are predicting mass death and hospitalizations to be in the ballpark of reasonably correct. Even more important to me is understanding the input data that these models are working from. Beyond that, let's remember, my contention is that it's been garbage information coming in, so I would expect garbage information to come out. To that end, I present no one other than Dr. Birx, who told us the following.
So I think in this country, we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality, and I think the reporting here has been pretty straightforward over the last 5 to 6 weeks. Prior to that, when there wasn't testing in January and February, that's a very different situation and unknown. There are other countries that if you had a pre-existing condition, and let's say the virus caused you to go to the ICU and then have a heart or kidney problem, some countries are recording that as a heart issue or a kidney issue and not a COVID-19 death. Right now, we're still recording it, and the great thing about having forms that come in and a form that has the ability to mark it as COVID-19 infection, the intent is right now that if someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that.
I also present to you Dr. Andy Bukacek in Montana, who's the director of the Montana Pro-Life Coalition and has been a practicing doctor for over 30 years. What does she tell us? She tells us the numbers are being reported as overinflated to begin with, and garbage coming into the models.
Inquiring minds want to know, are the reported deaths from COVID-19 truly deaths from COVID-19? To address this question, we need to discuss death certificates, since death certificates are the basic source of information about mortality. The discussion of death certificates is not a fun one. We have all grieved so many losses in our lifetimes. Still, we need to talk about it because they are the basis of the so-called death rate of COVID-19. History-changing decisions are being made due to these figures, despite the fact that they are flat out wrong, based on data that is insufficient and often inaccurate. Few people know how much individual power and leeway is given to the physician, coroner, or medical examiner signing the death certificate. How do I know this? I've been filling out death certificates for over 30 years. More often than we want to admit, we don't know with certainty the cause of death when we fill out death certificates. That is just life. We are doctors, not God. Autopsies are rarely performed, and even when an autopsy is done, the actual cause of death is not always clear. Physicians make their best guesstimate and fill out the form. Then that listed cause of death, whatever we list, is entered into a vital records data bank to use for statistical analysis, which then gives out inaccurate numbers, as you can imagine. Those inaccurate numbers then become accepted as factual information, even though much of it is false. So, even before we heard of COVID-19, death certificates were based on assumptions and educated guesses that go unquestioned. When it comes to COVID-19, there is the additional data skewer that is, get this, there is no universal definition of COVID-19 death. The Center for Disease Control, updated from yesterday, April 4th, still states that mortality, quote-unquote, data includes both confirmed and presumptive positive cases of COVID-19. That's from their website. Translation, the CDC counts both true COVID-19 cases and speculative guesses of COVID-19 the same. They call it death by COVID-19. They automatically overestimate the real death numbers by their own admission.
So what Dr. Bukacek and myself are saying is that it's impossible to get accurate information from the get-go. There's no definition of death from COVID-19, and everything is a guesstimate from the get-go. Again, that means we're dealing with numbers that are as broad as possible, given for the most leeway possible, and thus in the world of modeling will give us a pretty broad upward and downward guesstimate, the range of things like hospitalization, ICU stays, and even deaths. Even with giving the models the most broad data to work with, the models are way the hell off. They aren't just slightly off like Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx would have us all believe. Hell, in the matter of 8 days, we've seen 3 downward revisions, the third of which puts the death toll at 50% of the original scaremongering total that put us into a lockdown to begin with. 100 to 200,000 dead is a huge problem. 60,000 dead? Well, guess what? We put up with that almost every year in the United States when it comes to the flu and pneumonia. Those two guesstimates should give us very different public policy outcomes. No? Instead, we're being told by people like JVL that daring to ask those kinds of questions strips out the context and caveats. Does that sound like anything that I'm doing or Tucker or Dace are doing? Folks, this is gaslighting on a whole new level, if you ask me. It's the worst. Because what does JVL go on to do? Of course, he goes on to then pick apart a world-renowned epidemiologist, Newt Witkowski, who some skeptics have relied upon as their guiding light in the data battle. I've personally not done that because, again, I cannot emphasize this enough. If the information being collected is garbage, you're automatically going to get garbage information coming out no matter how good your modeling is. But the gaslighting continues as JVL tells us that Newt Witkowski is only an expert in quotations. Never mind that the man was the chair of biostatistics, epidemiology, and research design at the Rockefeller University for 20 years, or that the Rockefeller University is the oldest biomedical research college in the entire country and a really good one. But sure, he's just an expert. You're not supposed to take his expert opinion seriously, just the experts that JVL approves of. That's not to say that I trust everything that Witkowski had to say, by the way, because like I said before, I don't. No one should take any one person's opinion, even if it's rooted in data, as the gospel. Maybe we should, take in all sides and make a decision based off of all the information, opinions, and data-driven analysis. Wouldn't that be the prudent thing to do? But I digress. But if Dr. Witkowski is not good enough for you, how about the science of one Richard Epstein, who said the following after revising a post that he made on March 16th, now that his work has actually stood up to the scrutiny within scientific community. You know how science is supposed to work, peer review and all of that wonderful jazz. But Epstein said the following on Tuesday. Based on the data, I believe that the current dire models radically overestimate the ultimate death toll. There are 3 reasons for it. First, they underestimate the rate of adaptive responses, which should slow down the replication rate. Second, the models seem to assume the vulnerability of the infection for the older population, from 70 upward, gives some clue as to the rate of spread over the general population, when it does not. Third, the models rest on a tacit but questionable assumption that the strength of the virus will remain constant throughout this period, when in fact its potency should be expected to decline over time, in part because of temperature increases. Does this kind of analysis sound like glossing over things or stripping out context and caveats to you? But the gaslighting still continues on from JVL and the Bulwark, and this is the one that really got me laughing and fuming at the same time. Remember, JVL's contention is that we shouldn't hold the model to any level of scrutiny at all. It's just a prediction, and it cannot be taken literally. Well, just a few moments later in his work on Wednesday, he drops this bomb on us about Dr. Witkowski's Q&A that's going viral. Quote, he's incoherent even on the basic mechanics of what he's saying, and that is one problem. But the other is that his numbers have already been disproven by events. Today we'll go over 400,000 confirmed infections in the United States and 13,000 deaths. And remember, those numbers almost certainly undercount the reality on both scores. Does anyone see the irony here? JVL just got done scolding us all for daring to hold the IMHE model to any sort of scrutiny, and then goes on to do exactly that to Dr. Witkowski's claims, also known as predictions. Furthermore, Last's claim that the number of deaths as being undercounted has already been undercut by Dr. Birx's own admission that they're as broadly as possible defining death by coronavirus. Folks, if that's not hypocrisy of the highest order, I don't know what would be. You cannot demand the rest of us stop comparing reality versus predicted reality and then turn around and do the same thing and expect to be taken seriously going forward. You could, but you would be a fool. So remember, as you begin to see this talking point spread on the left and the right, it's actually something that came from Never Trumpers, by the way, who apparently are now on the Trump train because control. So remember, that's where this came from. Some would call it gaslighting too, by the way. But hey, what do I know? Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter at The Coppins Show, and my show is airing every Saturday at 5 p.m. Central Time on the Mojo 50 Radio, the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page. So, until next time we're together, Matthew 5:44.